Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Hello, I'm Napoleon Hill, and today I want to speak directly to you who feel life has come to a standstill, as if you've given your absolute best, yet haven't seen the results you'd hoped for. Have you ever wondered why, despite all your effort, you remain in the same financial, emotional, or professional rut? Or why you're afraid to challenge your beliefs because what if nothing changes? In this video, I'll reveal how a single conscious action, taken on just one day, can be the pivotal step that breaks through stagnation, because I've studied, lived, and applied a truth that millions are slow to embrace. Changing your internal blueprint changes everything. Stagnation always begins subtly. Stagnation. You wake up, do everything you've always done, follow the same routine, repeat the same thoughts, and at some point along the way, that unsettling feeling emerges that life could be so much more than it is, yet it stays the same. It's as if something inside you says, "I was meant for more than this," while another voice, softer and more persistent, tries to convince you, "There's no point trying, nothing ever really changes." And the most curious thing is that this feeling doesn't appear all at once. It grows slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it becomes a heavy burden that stays with you from morning till night. Many people believe they are stuck due to a lack of talent, opportunity, or luck. But in truth, what truly paralyzes people is fear. Fear of failure, fear of looking foolish, fear of trying and not succeeding, fear of looking at yourself and admitting you've become too small for your own dreams. How many times have you found yourself contemplating a career change, starting a new project, speaking to someone important, consciously managing your money? Yet before even taking the first step, something locked up inside you. How many brilliant ideas have you had in the shower or on your way to work, only to bury them minutes later with thoughts like, "It's not the right time, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough"? This reality is so common it's frankly terrifying. Studies show that the vast majority of people abandon their projects not due to incapacity, but due to procrastination, by waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. The brain creates such a powerful cycle of repetition that you begin to believe the life you're living is the only one possible. It comforts you with tiny excuses, minor justifications, small postponements, until months and years pass, and you look in the mirror with the strange sensation that you've been standing still. And that's exactly how I, Napoleon Hill, witnessed the loss of potential in thousands of individuals during my decades of research. I saw dreams dying before they were even born. I saw talents wasted because someone believed more in fear than in their own strength. I saw extraordinary people shrinking into mediocrity for lack of a single courageous move. However, I also saw stunning transformations unfold the exact moment a person admitted, "I'm stuck in a pattern," and today that pattern breaks. But recognizing the pattern isn't just about admitting something is wrong, it's realizing that what you repeatedly do is what you live. Routine has an almost hypnotic power. It makes you believe you're busy, but it doesn't allow you to advance. It makes you feel tired but never fulfilled. It's that state where you work all day, accomplish 1,000 things, but lie in bed with the feeling you haven't done anything that truly moves your life forward. It is like running on an emotional treadmill. A lot of effort, no real progress. And when you combine this with the emotional relationship most people have with money, the block becomes even deeper. The fear of financial failure is one of humanity's greatest breaks. The fear of losing, of not having, of disappointing family, of not being able to make ends meet if things go wrong. All of this makes you stay in the same job you hate, the same project that isn't thriving, the same decisions that drain your energy. Have you noticed how every time you think about risking something new, your mind immediately creates disaster scenarios? This is no coincidence. It's the pattern, and patterns only break when you do something you've never done before, when you see yourself with clarity. I lived this firsthand. I grew up in a simple cabin, lost my mother at the age of 9, and became a rebellious, restless boy, struggling to follow rules. And it was precisely during this turbulent period, when life seemed to point toward a limited trajectory, that my stepmother, an extraordinary woman, looked at me firmly and said, "You might be the smartest boy in the world, but no one has taught you how to use that intelligence. The phrase hit me like an electric shock. For the first time, someone gave me permission to believe I could be greater than my behavior, greater than my circumstances. That moment inaugurated the first great turning point in my life, and that's what I want to provoke in you now. Such a powerful reflection that makes you realize stagnation isn't a destination, it's merely a habit. And habits can be broken. It doesn't matter if you've tried before, if you've failed, if you've felt incapable. What matters is that today you can do something that interrupts the cycle. Something simple, direct, powerful, confronting what you've been repeating and admitting with complete sincerity, "This no longer serves me." When you recognize the pattern, you unlock the first door to transformation, because nobody changes what they cannot see. And the instant you see with brutal honesty where you stand, you are finally ready to move. The first step in this turning point is awareness. And awareness requires courage. From here, everything begins to change. Once you recognize the pattern that keeps you stagnant, the most decisive moment of the entire turning point arrives, to make a clear, firm, and immediate choice. A choice that doesn't depend on motivation, confidence, perfect conditions, or external approval. The truth is that the majority of people never break the cycle precisely because they fail to decide. They may desire to change, they may even dream of a new life, but they keep the decision at a distance, treating it as something to be made when everything aligns. And this is the greatest internal saboteur that exists. The decision is the turning point because it marks the break from the old you and inaugurates the birth of the new. This isn't a metaphor, it's the science of human behavior. Research shows that when you make a concrete decision, the brain stops wasting energy, simulating infinite possibilities, and begins to reorganize its internal resources toward a single objective. It's like lighting a lighthouse in the fog. Suddenly you know where to go, even if the path still seems dark. But this is where the biggest objection people raise, the fear of deciding incorrectly. How many times have you considered changing jobs, starting a business, studying something new, creating a product, reorganizing your financial life, and the very next instant your mind whispered, "What if nothing works out? What if I'm deluding myself? What if I lose everything?" This what if is the invisible prison that keeps millions living below their true potential. It's the internal protector that tries to convince you that the safest thing is to continue as you are, even if continuing as you are is already destroying your self-confidence and energy. And then another inevitable rhetorical question arises. How many opportunities have you missed because you waited to feel 100% certainty? How many years of your life have been left on autopilot because the decision that could change everything remained trapped in, "I'll get to it later"? The decision that breaks stagnation isn't one you make when you're inspired. It's one you make when you're tired, insecure, afraid. But you make it anyway. Because deciding isn't an emotional act. It's an act of courage. And courage, contrary to what many believe, isn't the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. I learned this intensely during my research alongside the most influential men of my era, and Henry Ford was one of the greatest examples of this. When he decided to create an affordable automobile for the common person, the experts of his time claimed it was impossible. They said the technology didn't exist, that the cost would be too high, that people would never trust machines for travel. But Ford didn't wait for everyone to believe. He made the decision internally first, a decision so firm that the obstacles became mere details, and it was precisely this clarity that guided him through years of trials, errors, critiques, and pressure. Result, he changed how the world moves. And it all began with a single moment of decision. Now imagine an ordinary person, like so many you know, perhaps even yourself. A person who earns their salary, pays bills, thinks about saving, thinks about starting a business, thinks about studying something new, but is always thinking. Nothing changes because nothing is decided. And the most dangerous thing is that the sensation of almost deciding gives the false impression of progress. It's like rowing without moving the boat. But observe what happens when that person finally decides, during the next 30 days, I will save 10% of my income, I will study 20 minutes per day, I will seek an extra source of income. At the exact moment of the decision, not later, not when the money appears, at the moment of the decision, stagnation begins to unravel. Because decision creates direction. Direction creates movement. And movement creates results. I myself needed to make a decision that completely changed the course of my life. When I met Andrew Carnegie, he made me a proposal that any young person of that era would have considered insane. He asked if I would be willing to dedicate 20 years of my life to interviewing the world's most powerful minds and creating a universal philosophy of success, all without any guarantee of financial return. Think about it. I was young, without wealth, without security, living in a time when failure meant starvation. The proposal was risky, it was irrational, it was terrifying. But in that very moment I decided, not after weeks of deliberation, not after consulting people who might never truly understand. I made up my mind right then and there. That single decision shaped my entire destiny. If I had hesitated, overthought it, or waited for more signs, perhaps today my name would be unknown. My work would never have touched millions, and modern personal development might not even exist as we know it. It wasn't luck. It wasn't inspiration. It was a pure and simple decision. And that is why a decision is so powerful, because it creates a point of no return within you. Once you decide, you cease to be a spectator and become the protagonist. Once you decide, fear loses its authority. Once you decide, the world begins to respond to your movement. Now the lingering question is, what decision do you need to make today? Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today. The decision that will break the pattern you've recognized. The decision that will prevent the next few months from being mere replicas of the past. The decision that will make space for a new version of yourself. Every turning point begins exactly here. And the next step is yours. Decision is the spark, but transformation happens when you tend the fire every single day. And this is where the power of imagination combined with immediate action comes in. The vast majority of people believe they should only act after they feel confident, motivated, or inspired, when in truth the order is precisely the opposite. It's action that awakens motivation, it's movement that creates clarity, and it's imagination that gives direction to the movement. But before all else, there's a silent fear almost no one admits, the fear of imagining a better life and nothing happening, fear of being frustrated again, fear of appearing naive, fear of believing in yourself and once more seeing no results. How many times have you thought about planning your financial future, visualizing bigger goals, imagining a promotion, a business, a lighter life, and before you even finish the thought, something inside you cut off the impulse with phrases like, "Don't get carried away, that's not for me, that's just a fantasy." This fear paralyzes more than a lack of money, and statistically, it affects most people. Research shows that individuals with low financial self-efficacy tend to avoid even imagining scenarios of prosperity because it activates emotions of anxiety and a sense of inadequacy. The mind prefers the safe zone of stagnation over the emotional risk of the dream. But here is the transformative truth. Imagination is not fantasy. It is the rehearsal of what your mind begins to accept as possible. When you repeatedly imagine a specific future, not vague, not generic, your brain starts to filter information, recognize opportunities, and direct behavior to validate that image. This is your reticular activating system at work, that internal mechanism that makes you start seeing what was previously invisible. Think of simple experiences. When you decide to buy a specific car, it starts appearing everywhere. When you learn a new word, it pops up in conversations, videos, and books. When you imagine a goal with details, the world begins to organize clues, signs, and paths you had never noticed before. It's not magic, it's focus, but it's not enough to imagine. You must combine emotion with immediate action. Imagine someone who decides to become financially stable within the next 12 months. If that person just thinks about it, nothing changes. But if they close their eyes for 1 minute and see themselves opening their bank statement with ease, paying bills without struggle, organizing investments and feeling proud, that emotion creates internal energy. And if immediately after that they take a minimum action, note down expenses, set aside $10, research a course, send an email, take a single step. The connection between imagination and reality begins to strengthen. It's at this point that stagnation begins to crumble, when you act immediately after visualizing. The action confirms to the brain that this is important. It's as if you're saying, "I believe in this enough to move my body." And then the brain responds, "Then I will work to make this real." I experienced this with brutal intensity during one of the most challenging periods of my life. During the Great Depression, my business collapsed. I lost almost everything. I was forced to leave my home in the state of New York and spend a period in hiding, literally fleeing creditors. It was humiliating, devastating, and I could have surrendered. There was no money, no stability, no applause left. And yet, there was something no one could take from me. My ability to imagine a different future and act, even without guarantees. It was precisely in that dark period that I began to visualize, night after night, that my work would help millions of people. I visualized with such intensity that I felt as if I were speaking to giant audiences, even while living in complete failure. And after that visualization, even when broke, I acted. I wrote a few lines, reviewed my notes, gave a free radio lecture whenever I could find a slot. Each small act was a silent declaration that I was not willing to accept that fate. And that's what I want to spark in you now. The awareness that immediate action, even a minuscule one, is worth more than any future motivation. Ask yourself, how many times have you had a brilliant idea in the shower, in the car, or before bed, and done absolutely nothing with it in the next 5 minutes? How many plans have died in the space between thought and action? If you want to break stagnation, do it today. Before sleeping, truly visualize the life you want a year from now. Then choose a single action, small, simple, concrete, that you will execute today or in the next few hours. It could be sending a message, starting a financial spreadsheet, watching a lesson, writing down your main goal, setting aside a minimum amount of money, calling someone, reorganizing a space. The size doesn't matter, the movement does. Imagine, feel, act, in that order. That is the formula. And when you repeat this practice day after day, your life will begin to move in ways you never imagined possible. After the decision is made and imagination begins to shape the path, there is one element that determines whether the transformation will become real or disappear like so many previous attempts: daily commitment. Most people don't fail because they choose bad goals, but because they try to transform their entire life in a single day. And when they don't see immediate results, they lose momentum. The secret is not in a grand explosion of motivation, but in the silent, consistent, and almost invisible repetition that builds a new identity. Many people believe that discipline is reserved for geniuses, athletes, or extremely organized individuals. But discipline isn't inherent. It's trainable. Studies show that more than 40% of our daily actions are automatic, guided by habits and not by conscious decisions. This means that if you don't build new rituals, you will continue living on autopilot, repeating exactly what you tried to escape. Repetition is the tool that reprograms the mind. Discipline is the muscle that sustains the turning point. And that's where something I discovered over decades of interviewing some of the world's most successful men comes in. None of them walked alone. They had a mastermind, a circle of mental, emotional, and strategic support, people who thought bigger, who stimulated ideas, who raised the standard. And this concept, which became one of the best-known pillars of my work, is not a romantic theory. It is a human necessity. The environment silently shapes our identity. How many times have you tried to start a new habit, a new project, a new routine, and after 3 days alone, everything fell apart? How many times have you committed to an important change, and because no one around you shared the same vision, you ended up wilting? It's not a lack of strength. It's a lack of emotional structure. Think of a person who decides to change their financial life. They spend an entire day motivated, watching videos, creating a list of goals. But without repetition, the next day they return to impulsive spending. Why? Because the brain reverts to the most familiar path. Now imagine that same person setting aside 5 minutes each day to review their goals, note their expenses, and message someone else who is also committed to growth. 5 minutes. It's enough to consolidate the new pattern. Small repeated acts build a new mind, and this repetition is even more powerful when combined with a support circle. It doesn't need to be large. It doesn't need to be formal. It doesn't need to be a huge group. Just one person. A single person who knows where you want to go and who will remind you, even in silence, that giving up is not an option. I experienced this intensely in my own years of research. While many people believe I did everything alone, my entire journey was shaped by minds that profoundly influenced me. Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, but also simple, unknown men who helped me with words, with ideas, with examples. The mastermind isn't just about big names, it's about mental synchronicity. It's about connecting with someone who makes you think bigger, speak bigger, act bigger. And there were times in my life when I myself needed support to keep from giving in. After the crisis of 1929, while facing financial difficulties, persecutions, debts, and public humiliations, my daily routine was what kept me going. Waking up, reviewing my notes, rereading the interviews I had conducted, writing a few pages, imagining the future, repeating this routine even when no one believed, even when there were no results, even when everything seemed to point to failure. The only reason I didn't give up is because even in the darkness, I still had points of connection. People who encouraged me, letters I received, invitations for small talks, fragments of support that renewed my energy. Repetition sustained me. Support anchored me. The turning point doesn't happen when life changes. It happens when you change what you repeat every day. Recognizing the pattern, deciding with firmness, imagining with intention, and acting with consistency. This is the foundation that pulls anyone out of stagnation and sets them on the path of consciously building their own life. And if you've noticed, none of this depends on perfect circumstances, on having money to spare, or on someone telling you it's possible. It only depends on you initiating the movement, even if imperceptibly, even if still full of doubts, even if your inner voice trembles a little, because it is with the first step that the energy shifts, and it is in the subsequent steps that destiny transforms. And if this awakens something within you, even if small, even if timid, then keep moving forward. The next video, which is already appearing on your screen, will help you climb one more step in your evolution of wisdom and assist you in becoming 1% better than you are now. Thank you for being here, for sharing this moment with me, and for allowing my words to find a place on your journey. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.